Hi everyone, in the previous video we looked at the Emperor, and now we're going to look at the Hierophant. A Hierophant is someone who interprets sacred mysteries or esoteric principles. So there are a lot of symbols in this particular card, as we can see, but we'll break those down in stages. But essentially the Hierophant has and is a representation of the 3 eons of Thelema, with Isis here representing the first eon, the Hierophant himself the second eon, and Horus, this dancing child within the star on the Hierophant's chest, representing the third eon here. First of all, we'll just look at just what the transition between the Emperor and Hierophant is, and then we'll look at the divinatory meanings of the Hierophant, and then go on to look at his symbolism in detail. The Emperor stood mainly for leadership, responsibility, self-control, discipline, focus, whereas with the Hierophant, he's the bridge between spirit and man. He represents more of the spiritual aspects of our lives rather than just internal discipline and focus. So the Hierophant represents more our spiritual groups, our rules of conduct in our life, because some spiritual paths have specific rules, such as being free of meat and alcohol, for instance. Or it could be any group related to structure and rules and regulations. He also represents our self-study in terms of spiritual topics. So many of the major arcana really represent our internal change, whereas the Hierophant is more concerned with external actions and structures within our life. And we'll see how that theme repeats throughout the video and in the next section to do with divination. These are some of the meanings of the Hierophant in the upright position. So you can represent traditional religious teachings or learning the basics of a subject before moving on to make your own decisions and forming your own and making your sort of spiritual path your own, which is more to do with the Lover's card, because we've got 2 people and that involves the element of choice. Very similar, indicates the need to follow rules, regulations and traditions. These are also beneficial in that they give our lives structure and meaning, and often relates to membership of a group or organisation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a spiritual group, but it's something that gives a certain amount of structure to our life, and having that, it enables us to develop skills and move forward. He can also represent a period of intense learning and education. As I said, he can relate to self-study as well, such as going to university, night class, learning a trade, and so on. In all of those, he represents learning fundamental principles. As I've indicated here, the need to follow tried and trusted means of success rather than going out at a tangent and following novel ideas to solve a problem. So he's more of a grounding influence. Becoming a mentor to others, because especially if we look at the Rider-Waite version of the card here, where we have the Hierophant, he's clearly giving spiritual instruction to the 2 people in the foreground here. And there's definitely a sense of subservience in this, far more than in the Crowley card, where the images blend together. So there isn't really the hierarchical structure with the Crowley card. Also marriage, which is an institution or a position in a company where there is an established order. Looking at the reversed divinatory meanings for the Hierophant, it could mean, if this card is reversed, that we are trapped by following a particular religion or doctrine, and we're doing so blindly without really questioning it too much, and we may or may not be in conflict with it. Sometimes we just don't know that we are just trapped within its restrictions. Problems in the workplace due to rules and regulations stopping us from reaching our potential. He could also mean a spiritual master, someone who is over-controlling, not allowing personal freedom and the freedom to make their own spiritual realizations. Too much reliance on traditional teachings, spiritual or otherwise, and not following our inner guide and intuition, which was represented by the High Priestess. So these all link in together. Reversed, the Hierophant can also mean that we've lost control over the structure of our life. So it may be due to an illness. It could be that we're just lazy, or we're going through a really hard time and it's difficult to hang on to basic daily plans for our life. Or it could mean that we're rebelling against social norms, which the Hierophant stands in his lowest aspect, and that is just norms for the sake of society. So we refuse to fit in with what society expects of us, and that can be a good thing. It could also mean going off at a tangent when problem solving, rather than not sticking to methods that are tried and tested. So it's like making those decisions that we make in the Lover's card, but too soon, without getting a structure and a grip of the fundamental principles. And that could be anything from our spiritual path to our career. So as you can see, he's all to do with structures and norms. So we'll look at his position on the Tree of Life next. On the Tree of Life, the Hierophant occupies the 16th path of eternal intelligence. He links the supernal triangle here, the top 3 sephira, with the rest of the tree. Sometimes this has been known by this rather strange term, macroposopos, and then you've got the microposopos, which represents the remainder of the tree. So this is like the universal spiritual principles, and this region here represents the more structured type of universe, until you get to the very dense bit at the bottom here, which is Malkut. So he provides a link, and that's where the definition of the Hierophant as being one who is in touch with the divine and transmutes it to man, that's where that link comes in. It's on the Tree of Life here. He links the Sephiroth Hokmah with that of Hesed here. And Hokmah is all about force, and Hesed is about building structures. So it's using that willpower coming from Hokmah, and making structures. And those can be physical, such as the building of churches, church buildings, spiritual buildings, and structures which exist in all aspects of our life. So traditionally he's seen as that masculine impetus to create things and structures in the world. It should be pointed out that the Hierophant should hear what is coming from the higher realms and transmit that into the world without bias. So in a sense he is just a channel. He should try and remove as much of his personality from that to become a pure channel, and we see that that often doesn't happen in the world, and in religions people fall short of what is expected of them in their roles. a little bit about the Hebrew association and also its astrological association with Taurus. So the Hebrew vow, which is this letter here, which occurs on the bottom of the card, means a nail, or that which joins. And as we saw in the previous section, he joined the universal with the rest of the tree of life here, more to do with structure. So he's that nail that links two different things together, though ultimately they are the one energy. It's just transmuted into form as it transgresses down the tree. So that's what the Hebrew letter vow looks like. It looks a bit like a nail. And also it's the sixth. It's the sixth card in the Major Arcana series. Starting with the Fool would be naught. The Hierophant is the number 6, and we can see here the number 6 represents a cube, but the crucifix here, the cross, is the outfolded cube. So with the cube here, we've got the 7th surface, which is the inner surface, the spiritual one, which is contained within the outer structure. Again, that relates back to the Tree of Life, where you've got the spiritual higher realms, and then you've got the lower Sephira here. So I've said that the card links with Taurus, and Taurus is an earth sign, so it pertains to the tangible, the material aspects of life. So this means that the Hierophant represents teachings through books, the internet, spiritual study, classes, and physical masters on the earth plane. We should also note that Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is a planet in which the moon is exalted or at its most potent. So this gives a subconscious or meditative quality to the Hierophant. In this section, we will look at the symbolism of the Hierophant in detail. So we're going to have a look at this top section first. Looking at the top bit of the card, we'll see it has a dark background to it, and that is the goddess Nut, who also appears in the Eon card here. It's this dark looping being, and it's like the dark matter from which the universe is manifest. And contrasting that, we have a 5-petal rose surrounding the head of the Hierophant here, and we have a snake and a dove. Now the snake and dove, or serpent here, also appear in the Tower card. We've got the dove on the left, and we've got the serpent in the form of Abraxas. That's with like a halo around its head here. So the snake, going back to the original picture here, represents the Kundalini. It goes from the lower spine upwards through the top here and the 1,000-petal lotus, and it's connected to the dove seen here, because dove represents spirit coming into matter. So both together represent the ever-flowing energy between spirit and matter. He also wears the hat of Osiris. Say stands for the second Eon, only it's turned round the other way. The light here is the light of the supernals, or the supernal triangle. The supernals being the 3 Sephira that make up that top triangle on the Tree of Life. So he is the light of spirit is communicating through his top chakra here, and he then teaches that to the world. It's also within this window here, we have the 5-petal rose, and the rose is a symbol of Venus, and Venus is a planet to do with love. So you have that love of the higher realms, that universal love, coming through, as we saw in a previous video, that the universal love connects all of the different sephira on the tree of life. There are 9 nails to the window here around the outer edge, and that number 9 is connected to Yesod, the 9th sephira on the tree of life, and the moon here. And the moon, as I said, is exalted in Taurus, and Taurus rules the Hierophant, so that's where that links in. We'll now take a look at the 4 cherubs in the corners of the card. Traditionally, if we look at the Rider-Waite version, we have Taurus in the lower left, and that corresponds the same in the Crowley card. We have Leo the lion in the lower right, but these top 2 are transposed, or it seems as if they're transposed. We have the eagle of Scorpio in the top right and the angel in the top left. It seems as if these have been transposed, but they haven't, because essentially these all relate to the fixed signs of the zodiac. So you have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio and Aquarius, but what Crowley has said, or his vision for the new eon, would be that the angel is a sign not of Aquarius but Scorpio, and the eagle is a sign of Aquarius. These can also be seen in church windows, and you can see here we've got Matthew, Mark, and these have been assigned to some of the books of the New Testament. The geometrical figures in this card are very interesting. We have the Hierophant enclosed within a hexagram. Hexagram has 6 sides, and within that we have an inverted pentagram, and within that we have an upright pentagram. So this relationship between 6 and the 5, as I said, the 6 or the cube, which I talked about in a previous slide, is like the complete man with his spirituality contained within him. Whereas the 5 relates to the 5 senses. So the 5 senses are nailed. It's like the symbolic crucifixion of Christ with the 5 wounds. It's going beyond the 5 senses to the spirit. It's that sacrifice of the 5 to the 6th. The Hierophant holds in his right hand the staff with the 3 loops. Now in the book of Thoth, he does attribute colours to them, which I've superimposed on this diagram here, and the 3 circles represent the 3 eons, with Horus being scarlet, that's on top, and then you have the green of Osiris. Sorry, the green is for Isis. I'll have to go in and redo this diagram. And pale yellow for Osiris here. As I say, that isn't illustrated in the actual card itself. They haven't been drawn in colour. His left hand, we have the 2 fingers pointing outwards, which is a religious blessing. And this is a sign of forming a bridge between heaven and earth, similar to the gesture in the Rider-Waite Magician card, where we see the finger pointing downwards, and obviously he's bringing energy from spirit above through the wand and down into creation. The throne of the Hierophant is made from a bull. As you say, this is the bull's head here, this is its body, and it goes around him, and these are the bull's legs here, which again is a sign of Taurus. Taurus, being an earth sign, means essentially his esoteric teachings are grounded on the earth plane, and his teachings should be done in a practical way. You can also see here, we've got one elephant here and another on the opposite side of the Hierophant, and again that is an elephant is a beast of burden, and it's associated with Taurus again. We can now move on to the figure in the foreground, which is Isis here. Isis is also referred to as Venus, or the Scarlet Woman, and she's the mother of Horus, the dancing child, within the pentagram on the breastplate of the Hierophant. This ray of light here hits the sword where the sword is at the point of the womb, so that's bringing forth new life, and that is symbolic both in the birth of a child or in the birth of a new eon. We have the lunar crescent here forming the bow of Armistice, and the sword between her legs links her also to the adjustment card. So here you can see the sword which is in the middle of the adjustment card, and for the priestess we have the bow of Armistice here, and again we have that lunar, that moon influence. So she's armed with this sword here because the woman is not seen as passive in the new eon as she was in previous eons, but she's on a par with her male counterpart. The sword is also representing the phallus, and so you have this mixing of energies and that communication with this ray of light, which you can see surrounds her head, neck and body. So that's communication with the divine. Moving on to the child Horus here within the upright pentagram. He's seen as dancing, whereas the others are, the Hierophant and Isis, are more static figures. He's much more flexible, so it's like representing that flexibility of the empowerment of the new eon. Just illustrated there, we've got an upright pentagram, but we've also got a sandal strap on the right ankle, which is this black coloration here. The sandal strap is supposed to represent the fifth power of the Sphinx, which is to go, and that's something that Crowley added. With the Sphinx again, you've got this combination of Scorpio, Aquarius and Leo. And the powers of the Sphinx are to know, to dare, to will and to keep silent, which correspond to the four elements. And the thing to go, spirit, was added by Crowley, and that represents spirit and the freedom of the dancing child that we've just talked about. And the upright child is similar to this diagram here, which we can see the image of a man, and that's to do with phi, P-H-I, or the golden ratio, or beauty, and I talked a bit about that in the notes, but I won't detail it in here. But the top and bottom of it is that the dancing child dances with the freedom from the entrapment of structures from orthodox religion. So he's set free. He's not restrained by religious boundaries. And if we say, looking back to the traditional Rider-Waite card here, it is very hierarchical. So that's it for the symbolism. We'll now move on to the last section of the video, which is to do with the application of the Thoth Hierophant to the Celtic cross. The Hierophant in position number 1, the dominant energy of the spread or heart of the situation. A possible divinatory meaning would be learning about spiritual matters, and that could be upmost in the querent's mind at this time. In position number 2, it's crossing. So it could indicate being trapped by religious doctrine or repressive work environment where structures, organisation, rules, regulations are getting in the way. So we are not that dancing child of Horus. In position number 3, unconscious influences could be that we need to feel the need to conform to society's rules. So we feel under pressure and we don't really feel we have the freedom to be who we want to be, and it may just be something that is in the background that we've found difficult to bring to the surface, and it's just that fear and anxiety that just sort of hangs there. In position number 4, the recent past could indicate a period of intense learning, for instance going to university, being within a structure. Position number 5, our hopes and goals, could be to be part of a spiritual group or organisation and having like-minded people to relate to, something that will give us a structure for learning fundamental principles of spirituality or religion, seeking wisdom. Position number 6 here, our near future, we may find a spiritual teacher or group useful at this time, or it could be a period of study coming up, or a period where maybe we've started a new job and we've got to learn a new way of working under a new work environment with lots of rules and regulations. Position number 7, for instance, if the Hierophant is reversed, it could mean that we struggle to fit into society's norms, that we really don't like to have rules, regulations imposed upon us by other people, or we might have problems with authority figures, that sort of thing. Position number 8, external influences, something which gives us structure and security, such as our job or our religion, but lacks flexibility to give us the freedom to think for ourselves and become like this dancing child here. Position number 9 here, guidance and warning, the need to connect with your inner guide and develop your spiritual ear, as well as listening to the advice of others, that should be. Connection with our higher self will give us a greater freedom than always following the advice of others. So once we get our, say for instance, our spirituality, once we get to know the nuts and bolts of it, we need to make it our own and need to make it work for us as an individual. And finally, position number 10 here, our long-term outcome, if the Hierophant occurs there, could mean that we're going to become a teacher, either spiritual, academic, vocational or otherwise, a position where we are mentoring others and passing on our wisdom and learning, giving people more structure and meaning to their life, which is all very good. Well, that gives you a fair bit to get to grips with the Hierophant, so hopefully that has been of some use. We'll move on to the Lovers as the next card in the Major Arcana sequence.